So apparently this is now official. Anything you don't want being set on a record, uploaded to YouTube, just write it out in a subtle way.
And thank you everyone for being here for our presentation today. We are going to talk about how you can build remote collaboration across cross-continent distributed teams.
So, presuming you're here, it's either that you happen to like Adriana and I a lot, or you actually do want to figure out how to collaborate a little bit better. So, fun story of just, showing up to Chicago for MidCamp. I got off a plane earlier on Wednesday, had to figure out that I don't own a coat anymore. That was fun. Texas is warm, Chicago is variable. But Adriana, you also showed up from where?
From Moldova, where the weather is kind of similar actually to Chicago. But I'm traveling quite a bit for the next month in the US, so I have to pack a very big luggage for various different types of weather. So that was fun, but it comes better with practice.
Yeah. And this is kind of a recurring theme for, at least our company and how we work, but also I think for a lot of those of us in the room who work in Drupal. We have colleagues we've never met in person who are in Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, wherever. And one thing that I've seen a lot of is it can be very hard to actually build a connection with those team members who are, an entire continent away. It's very different than being just, 1 or 2 time zones different. So with that, we just wanted to give a really short, sweet presentation of just 10 tips of how to do collaboration a little bit better. There's a quiz at the end and prizes, or maybe not if we run out of time.
Yeah, so the first one that we wanted to start with is be aware. This is very important when you work with people from all around the globe. First of all, you probably should do some research in getting to know them a little bit as a culture, or what they represent, or what does the geography that they are in represent, and how you should approach that to have a better team collaboration. It's also important to be aware of people's schedules and the differences in time zone, because when you work with people across the globe, it's very important to make sure that you have points when you synchronize, but you're also respectful of everyone's time. And one of the other key things is when you work with different team members around the globe, it's very important to understand everyone's roles and responsibilities. Make sure that you have that very clearly defined and that you're not misunderstanding anything regarding that.
Fun little side tip, daylight savings time does not operate at the same time everywhere. So there was some fun chaos a little while ago when we realized half of our teams switched and the other half did not. And Outlook was less than helpful in making sure the update worked, seamlessly across everyone's calendars. But really on this whole notion of being aware is also figuring out how to keep yourself organized for that. One day I had to go and take out an entire, map out every office we work with, and found out there was only 1 hour, one very special hour from about 6 to 7 CST that, all of our teams were for the most part off. The other 23 hours of the day, someone was on and working based on the different regions. And once we kind of had done that, we wanted to, just actually encourage our teams to be more organized. So we established, the rules and responsibilities of what each office and each person in those offices is responsible for. And then we actually, the first time we get the chance to work together, outline, what needs to happen for collaboration between those different individuals. We make sure to also go through and here's the tools we're going to use. If you need me for an emergency, text me. If you need this for a more casual thing, update it in Slack or another chat system.
Yep. And one of the things that ties to that in regards to process details, I actually got to experience last year a lot when I was traveling in the US for a pretty long time. Because I was still working with our team in Moldova, where we have an office, it was hard to find a lot of time when we could connect. So one of the things that I was doing is that every night I was kind of preparing a document with some priorities for the team that they should really work on and try to pay attention to. Now, there's one thing regarding this, because we use a lot of tools and we use Jira, Slack, and other things to communicate, but there are situations when things can get a little bit lost, and it's important to make sure that you're always transparent. You can document things in different ways, but the more details you offer, the better for everyone to be on the same page. And besides doing that priorities document, there's always a lot of details that we also try to do in terms of the processes. One of the key tools that we use is calendars, because everyone is spread around the globe and we need to find time to connect. We always make sure that we use the calendar and schedule time for various check-ins and try to be aware of the different time zones. If we use chat tools, set up the statuses there. We also, one of the tricky things that we do is that we try to add personal time slots when we are busy in our calendar, so that you can just name them as busy. No one needs to know what you're doing in that time, but people will be aware that you're not available to have a call during that time. And that's a key thing that you need to work and understand when you collaborate with a big team.
Right. I mean, we take for granted if we're in an office with someone, we know that they're out to lunch. But those little breakdowns of someone being in another region and you're expecting them to have some overlap with you, but they're actually out getting dinner, or they need to pick, their kids up from work, it's a lot harder than it seems. And funny enough, I also have found that if you're working like yourself or changing your schedule to fit another office's time schedule, it's helpful to put in, just some general cadence of this is what is going on in my life. I have the unfortunate honor of being the main person FFW who has to list their sleep schedule on the calendar, because I will travel frequently enough that even if I'm in Asia, my sleep time needs to stay the same, and different people in Europe need to figure out when that is. And that's actually it was kind of sad putting it in the first time, but it was very helpful to actually realize, okay, here's the time when it's unreachable, here are other times when I am reachable.
And that helped Andrew and I actually get a very good understanding of when we can find time to connect and discuss about the different projects, and when he definitely needs some time to actually recharge his batteries so that the next day we can be more productive and collaborate and communicate about all of those different things.
Right, especially when we're on a 24-hour cycle, sometimes with different offices taking different responsibilities.
Yep.
Right, do you want to go to the next one?
I think, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
Sure. And part of that is being just very, very clear. Like when you're talking with colleagues in other offices, simple, direct communication, adapt your language to each audience, and if there's ever a doubt, over-explain yourself. And I cannot emphasize that enough. It could be painfully heavy to realize you put in an extra page of notes to explain one topic, but the time saved can be huge. And Adriana, I think you had some examples in terms of being clear, though. We've done a few times.
I think there's a lot of situations when that can go in different ways,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, there's a lot of examples that I could think of. Maybe we should discuss about them a little bit later.
Right,
We get
and we're going to
some
illustrate
other-
some of that throughout the presentation.
Yeah.
But
We're going to name some of those other things as we move along.
right, so those are just easy. Do these things every day, right? Just, open-ended. They don't require a huge change in life. But the next set is a little harder.
Yeah. And one of the other key things that we've learned across the time that we collaborated together is the importance of being flexible. When we work with different people, we need to understand that everyone is different. They were brought up in a different way. They have different ways of working with one another. So it's very important to adapt. And adaptability is actually key in today's world and technology and how everything works. So we try to make sure that we are conscious of that, and that we understand that this is very important in our collaboration. And one of the other things that we do is that we try to take it a step further and put ourselves in someone else's shoes when we actually try to understand how they are thinking, or how can we make this better so that things will work out in the long run, because that's actually the goal, to make sure that the work relationship is a good one over the long-lasting time.
Mm-hmm. And really, being flexible. Sometimes plans change, especially when we're dealing with large enough projects or big enough tasks. I mean, anyone who's been in Drupal contribution space knows that plans change, right? Working on a module, someone puts in another 20 different features and bugs, and all of a sudden the next 4 months of your life look radically different. To really get around this, though, the other value that we like to think about is being curious. When you need to change and be flexible, like, ask why, right? Ask a lot of questions. Again, a lot of questions. I know the first few times Adriana and I were collaborating, there was often a gap of, what is it that we should be doing together? What are we trying to accomplish? We'd have a project or have some tasks, but figuring out what the value of us being able to collaborate and build our teams together was a little more unclear. And that required opening ourselves to think differently and different perspectives.
Yeah, and on the note of different perspectives though, there's actually a saying that I really like: when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So you have to really ask a lot of questions to prepare yourself before going to Rome, so that when you get to Rome, you're actually present in the moment. And that's a very important feature to actually develop about yourselves. So one of the things that we try to do as a team is also trying to meet offline. Not in Rome, because we don't have an office there, but sometimes we are lucky enough to be present at conferences like these or visit different other offices that we have around the globe. And we try to create shared experiences there and a vocabulary that we can use to understand each other better. We also have regular check-ins with various team members when we work. Ideally, we do videos, or at least we should do audio, and that's very important for building all of these connections.
Mm-hmm. And this is something I do think gets overlooked a lot, right? With email, chat systems, we can all check in 24 hours a day if we want to. You can message someone really easily, get an update, move on. It's a little bit different though than being able to actually, talk to someone and spending the time, even when that barrier is a little harder at first. But this also opens up, new experiences, and sometimes they can be very interesting ones. Kind of fun side story. When I went to our Hanoi office for a little while, it turns out that I accidentally booked the same Airbnb that another member of our company from Europe was in, because it was apparently the closest one to the office. So naturally, we both ended up in the same spot. We ran into them again in California, in Boise, Idaho, in New York, and they're the same people who worked with Adriana for a long time. So those small offline experiences, piece by piece, add up. For a lot of us who come to camps like this, we see people we see, once or twice a year in person. That's part of what makes the Drupal community, really worthwhile. But since this is about more than just a Drupal community.
Yep, there's a couple of final tips that we wanted to share, which are actually very important when building all of these remote connections. And first one that we thought of is about being humble. And that's an important trait for everyone to have, but especially important when you work with a team and you learn that sometimes you can be wrong, and that's a normal process in life. It's something, it's an experience, and you have to go through all of these learning lessons, and they build you up as a character and also as a better human. It's important not to make assumptions. Always think in a positive way and assume the positive situation and reaction for everyone. But also, it's important to acknowledge when you are wrong or when someone else on the team is wrong and learn from that experience and understand how do you analyze that and how you can move forward and actually improve the next time and prevent that from happening, or how you can make this as a better process in the future.
And it's an interesting activity to actually acknowledge when you're wrong or when someone else is wrong and be able to talk through it. To be very honest, when Adriana and I first started working together, there were a lot of differences of opinion. It's been 4 or 5 years now, so that's to be expected. But it took a while to realize that one thing that has worked very well for us building collaboration is, we all make wrong calls. If you're not actually being wrong at some point, it means you're probably not trying and trying not to push the envelope a little bit. And being able to bring that out in the open and talk through, okay, yeah, that call on a particular module set did not make sense. Let's try something different. Especially before we had a chance to meet each other in person, that dialogue actually builds a lot of trust. Whether you're working with contractors or a client or someone else on your own team, it's a difficult but interesting activity to try out. Go ahead, next one.
Well, the next one is about being happy, which is very important in the work culture. So there's a couple of things that we do about that. We try to celebrate the different small wins or big wins that we have, and we try to make work fun.
Yeah, piece by piece. This is, again, one of those things that the reason it's toward the end is this is not something we always do day in and day out. This is something harder to get in digital collaboration, right? Figure out a way to communicate positive and joyfully. And when I say that positive and joyfully, I mean it took us about an hour to figure out what exactly are we trying to say with that one bullet point. Right? Humor doesn't always translate across borders, doesn't translate across cultures or even just across people's vocabularies. But trying to keep a more positive bent to the communication, be able to throw in some form of a joke is useful,
Yep.
as long as it's going to be understood.
True.
But this really comes down to, can you make a shared digital space until you have a physical one to actually connect with the team?
And we also encourage people to share their accomplishments, even if there could be personal ones. So we have a lot of, we have different channels in our various tools that we use, like a pets channel, or and people share pictures of their dogs in a digital space so that we can see little glimpses of their life and how they go on their daily basis. People also share their personal accomplishments, like we have people that have run marathons and they are happy to share that with someone else in the team. And in some cases, people use that as an example to actually take that as a mentor type of tool and actually apply that moving forward. However, one of the important things about people sharing those experiences is actually the quality of being vulnerable. And this is, I would say, the most important thing and quality that actually is key to building all of these connections. In a remote way, in an offline way, it's all about how we interact as humans with one another. So when we have a fun story to share about this. Last year, Andrew was visiting Moldova, our office there, and we took a trip to Odessa in Ukraine.
Right around the time the Russians had actually also put their fleet outside of Odessa in the Crimea. That was fun.
Yeah. So we had a car. We were driving to Odessa. So basically, when you're stuck for a couple of hours in a car, there's really no way to get out of the car. You have to discuss with the people that are there. So you have to actually be interested in your in the people that are there, in your coworkers or your friends. You have to ask questions. You have to answer the questions that they ask. So it's all about trying to find a lot of common interests that you have, or trying to figure out what does the other person like, or what should I be aware of that the other person is doing, or how do I get to build all of these connections with them. And when there's no way to get out, you have to learn how to do that, and you have to be comfortable with also being vulnerable, because it's about reciprocating. You share something, the other person shares something, and then you build a beautiful relationship.
And just note, there's not a lot in between Moldova and Odessa, so there's, even if you wanted to get out, not a lot you could get out to go to. Also, for the best, if you don't speak Ukrainian or Romanian, that maybe stay in the car with people who can help you translate. But Adriana's right, it's a funny story aside, it was a good time because we also had one of our technical leads and some other colleagues from Chisinau who were able to join us. And once you're stuck with some group for 4 or 5 hours, you do end up actively either avoiding them or trying to make an effort to get to know them. The active avoidance part's a little hard when there is also no 4G signal for the entire drive, and there is no radio station. So, thusly, we all actively decided to get to know each other. But this also led to, talking about common interests, and learning to respect, how people want to define what relationship they want.
Yeah.
And go ahead, sorry.
Sometimes you have to also respect someone's boundaries, because someone may be interested in sharing everything about their life, but there are other people that are a little bit more closed, and they are a little bit more introvert. They're not exactly comfortable sharing some aspects of their life until they actually get to know you better. So I think being understanding in regards to that is also very important, because otherwise people will not let you in the future, and they will try to keep their guard up, and it's a little bit more difficult to get through it.
Right. So if we want to bring all this together, we have trademarked this wonderful new slogan that was presented at all Agile conferences. I think the way to pronounce it is be a takvekvu, but outside of trying to figure out if that means something in Klingon, I don't know if that's really the easiest way to summarize. Instead, Adriana had a much better version.
Yeah, so our summary of this was just be human, build collaboration, and grow trust. Because at the end of the day, it probably comes down to that.
Right.
So.
And our goal in kind of just going through the checklist is, simple tips when you're working with a client, when you're working with a partner, when you're working with your own team member. Just try to go through this in exercises. When we build relationships, they span a lot of different, professional levels. But every time that we've gone through this, we end up, Adriana and I in particular, working with the same clients for 4 or 5 years in a row, and we try to apply these same values to how we work with them as we work with each other. So, questions?
Sure. Can you go back to tip 7?
Sure.
Let's take notes and that will kind of quick.
Okay.
So that's a request, not a question, right?
So that was, I think.
Next one.
Next one, 7.
Yep.
So
The remote's going a little.
Yeah, big press. That's.
Yeah, there we go.
Sounds like you just sit by when you said it.
You had a question?
Yeah. So it's like we're both here in Chicago, and we're involved in the community here in Chicago. But kind of how do you get involved in these other communities if you want to build a team that's more distributed? Where does that start? At least for you guys, where did it start?
It's interesting. So actually, the Drupal in general kind of Slack instance is really nice in that you can find different communities in different states to join. We found it really interesting that when there was a Drupal Idaho channel set up, no one really thinks about Idaho and Drupal. However, shocking number of Drupal developers are actually in and around that area. We were able to build some connections over into Washington, Denver, and places, just joining that. And another great way is if you have particular pieces of the community you're working on, particular modules, go through and try to set up some time to talk through the maintainers or anyone else who's active in it. The Drupal world is actually very interconnected, and we've kind of organically built out a lot of those piece by piece.
So forming connections online and then transitioning those into working more closely and being in the real world. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for maybe more technical applications, but is there a specific software that you use to collaborate online, like GoToMeeting or anything else similar to that?
Adriana, if only you had a presentation on this.
Yeah, I did a presentation a while back about a lot of the tools that we use. It's somewhere online if you Google it. It's called the Modern Project Management Toolkit, a session that I did in Kiev. But there's a couple of core tools that we use. The number one of them for team collaboration and communication is Slack. So there we organize a lot of things in a very specific way. We have for different projects a dev channel, a design channel, account channel, a client channel. So we try to focus the conversation for various topics, so that we keep the people that are involved in a specific role concentrated around that communication. We don't need to flood them with a lot of other unuseful information if it's not helping them to do the work. Besides that, we use Basecamp for a lot of client communication. We use GoToMeeting for meetings that we do remotely. We use Slack calls as well for more team-oriented communication, but when we need to get more people together, we usually default to GoToMeeting. We use, of course, Jira for task management and all the things related to that, and there's a lot of communication happening there. And Google Drive for documents and other things related to that.
And of course, GitHub and Bitbucket for actually sharing feedback on code and features we're working on together.
And there's various key actions and tools that we, or labels that we use for that, and we have different processes set up for how to work better with those tools.
Great, thank you. And then what was the task management one?
Jira.
How do you spell that?
J-I-R-A.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Any other questions?
No? Then great. Or do you have a follow-up?
One more.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine.
I don't want to take anybody else's time. But, what about the Moldova camp? Is that happening again, or what other camps over in Europe?
So there's an upcoming camp in Kiev that's happening in May. There is a Drupal Dev Days happening in Romania. I think it's in Brasov or something like
Yeah,
that,
that's-
or like Cluj. I don't remember exactly the city. We had a couple of mold camps. I am not sure if there's another one coming up soon, but generally there are various events, Drupal-related events happening in the area. I think one of the one that happens most frequently is the Kiev one, and then in Romania there's also a bigger community that also helps organize that. I think those are the closest two countries that we have around, but we have other offices in Western Europe, so there's other events happening there too, like in London. I think there's things happening in Copenhagen, in Paris as well.
Yeah, kind of everywhere where
Yeah.
everywhere that there's Drupal developers and people interested, there's always some events.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you're ever in Boise, Idaho, we have a wonderful time. Come up to our office to actually go through and we do pizza. I think that is, we put it on the map, that is the most remote Drupal meetup because Boise is actually rather far from a little bit of everywhere. Cool. Any others?
Okay,
Thank you.
very much.